Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Executive Conversations. In this podcast, I talk to marketing leaders about the behind the scenes of marketing. Outside of execution, what does it actually take to get to the execution stage? And recently, we've been talking more about how the marketing role is shifting in the face of AI, in the face of higher pressures to do more with less. This isn't anything new, but with so many shifts in technology, changes are faster in the last 3 months than it has been in all of last year. The pressure's going up. I'm really excited today to talk to Rachel Weeks as my guest. Rachel has more than 20 years experience leading successful growth teams in B2B tech. She loves watching movies, Boston sports, and good cover bands. She's married and mom to a 16-year-old son who enjoys listening to pop music with her and hopes to play baseball in college. We all wish that he is going to do that. I'm going to wish him the best. She has experience as VP in marketing at HR tech companies like MP and Reward Gateway. And I am just really excited to dive into this conversation today. How's it going, Rachel?
Oh, great. Thank you so much for that lovely intro, Maeva. I'm really excited to be here.
Same. There's so much that we just talked about in our pre-recording little chat. I always find that sometimes I start getting into conversations with people. I'm like, oh, I wish I had already been recording because I feel like we were having some pretty good conversations. And I think that we could get started already talking about you have 20 years experience in marketing leadership. And I would be really interested in just getting your perspective on how you think the role of marketing has been changing now. We've been having conversations on Pavilion, and I know you said you've been having different conversations as well in other communities like Exit 5, different kinds of conversations. I would just like to dive into your perspective about how this whole role is changing, not only leadership, but just the expectations of marketing in general.
Absolutely. I mean, you hit the nail on the head when you said earlier that the market has changed more in 3 months than it had in the previous year before that. And I think we're just going to continue to see such a continued rapid evolution of everything to do with not only marketing, but just go to market in general, which of course includes, marketing and sales and client success and, really everything to do with taking a product, out to market publicly. And AI has been such a powerful, amazing tool that everyone is still, really trying to figure out how to hone it in, in its best capabilities, but also our best capabilities.
Mhm.
So it's been a really interesting time for sure.
It's quite interesting that you say it that way. When you say honing in its best capabilities with our best capabilities, can you elaborate what you mean by that?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel really strongly that AI is a complementary tool to humans. There are lots of things that technology can replace humans for. We've all go through the dial-up support system that you don't talk to a human, and there's plenty of automation that has existed and is really just, getting more powerful and, becoming better, and that's never going to change. But, for the most part, humans offer a certain level of creativity, empathy, innovation, that, whether or not people believe AI can replicate those things, I truly don't believe it can replace them. So I look at AI, like I said, as being a complementary tool.
Mhm.
If I'm a writer and I want to write something, I love to go to ChatGPT and kind of ideate on that. Hey, I have an idea. I'm thinking of this. And it just helps get your thoughts organized. I'm not someone who's going to sit down and say, write me an article on this and then just submit it as my own. Right. So it's figuring out what your best skills are and how you can leverage something like a chat GPT or another AI tool, to fully complement those.
Do you find I think marketers are in a really tricky spot because I feel like I agree with you, but getting a lot of pressures from clients to figure out how to do that anyway. Um, Even though the competition is getting higher because of all of this, so it's actually harder to do things. The pressure is getting higher to be able to do these things, and we're not being given the time to actually sit and learn how to build these systems and do it the right way, other than shortcuts. Um, how has your experience been navigating these kind of pressures, competition and needing to prove to leadership that somehow you're figuring out how to use this?
So, I've been a leader for many years and I've had lots of different teams, people that, I've come into a new role and inherited an existing team. And then, of course, hired people, myself. And, you're hiring great people, you're hiring smart people, but you have to set them up for success. And so you have to give them training and you have to give them onboarding and you have to identify what they're really good at so that we can capitalize on those things and then identify the gaps to help them fill it in. I cannot take credit for this, but I saw somebody on LinkedIn who said training ChatGPT or your AI tool is just like training a new hire. They
Yeah.
don't know anything when they come in, or maybe they have a certain basis of knowledge, right? But they need the context for your organization. They need the messaging. They need the voice. They need to learn the product. And so, what you just said about the expectations being so high to produce so soon, that's where leaders really need to pause and make sure that they're educating themselves as well as others. Because if you don't invest the time into your AI tool to onboard it and educate it and train it, you're not setting it up for success. So that's one of the things, that's definitely evolved over time. There wasn't a technology tool that you necessarily had to teach to do better at its job. We have to learn how to use technology tools and we need to adopt them into the things that we do every day. But ChatGPT or other AI tools, you can train them. So you have to think of it as, just like a junior employee.
Yeah.
Maybe, I mean, we know there are lots of tasks, that the AI tools, random data sorting and just like busy work that you would give to an intern or you would give to an entry level employee, but they're smart enough to do other things. So just take the time to train the AI to do those manual tasks, really minute tasks for you so that you can really leverage the intelligence of people, to do other things that add value.
Do you see the marketing leaders like that's the person who is training the AI, who's
Well, that's
responsible
an
for
interesting
this?
question. I mean, I think it depends on the context and in how it's being used, right? I would like to think, or I would hope that in most marketing organizations, you have a messaging framework, and that's driven by the VP of marketing and other go-to-marketing leaders in the company. You agree on what your go-to-marketing message and your framework is, and then the content marketing manager and the email marketing manager and the product marketing manager, they're all producing content out of that messaging framework. They are probably each training their GPTs on their individual frameworks because something that the
Mhm.
content marketing manager is doing is very different than what the product marketing manager is
Right.
doing, rather than writing an email. Right. So I think it's the individual users that are doing the training, but it's got to be based on some source of truth. And that as a messaging framework, for example, would typically come from marketing leadership.
That comes from more, which you would be giving to them anyway before the use of
Right.
AI. Yeah, you would have passed them.
Exactly.
But then there's three-way education to happen. There is educating the GPT. I saw, by the way, that you just wrote a post about you building your own personalized GPT. I'd be excited to learn about that. But there's educating your GPT, educating your team. I think this is a really big thing is the AI upskilling, which is
Hmm.
really the biggest challenge, I think. And then educating leadership on like what the actual timeline is where we can have fully adopted. I mean, there's so many degrees as well of AI that we could possibly implement. And so what
Hmm.
educating them on the potential expectations here. So how do you balance all those three things?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Another thing that I won't take credit for, but it certainly circulates often on Pavilion and Exit 5 and on LinkedIn, is that the chief marketing officer or the head of marketing is often the chief education officer within the company. within the executive team. And, we're doing so much educating on what is our messaging framework, what is our go to market strategy, what is our value proposition. And then to the C level and the CEO and the board is how are we performing, against our key metrics, having leveraged all that strategy, and how are we using AI to support that. So, they say kind of the higher up you get, within marketing executive leadership, the less marketing you're actually doing. But the more educating and sharing and translating of data analysis and all that kinds of stuff. So you got to know that if that's the job that you want, that you got to love that, which I do. That kind of stuff gets me really excited. But you have to balance that with, really being in touch with your team. And, I, as a leader, get so much really just joy and pleasure out of being a leader and seeing the people on my teams, be successful and seeing them achieve their goals. And I've just been so privileged to have so many amazing people on my teams over the years that have risen to higher levels, in their careers that, I can't even hire them anymore, because everybody's just been so successful. And so you got to be able to balance that with, the education that you're doing with your executive team. And then I think the third would be, the external audience as well.
The external audience. Oh, customers.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. That's a lot of different stakeholders to manage
That's a lot of different stakeholders to manage. Yes.
as one person, and a lot of different balls to juggle, because it's not even doing all this AI education in the 3 different ways that we talked about, but then it's also doing the actual marketing. So wait, it's the education, it's the getting buy-in and reporting on performance, connecting all the dots, getting the budget, and then
The doing it.
delegating the team, or working
Yeah.
with the team, the
Yeah.
execution.
And of course, it's not just, within a marketing organization, but, marketing and sales really need to operate as a unified growth team in order to achieve their best results, in my opinion. And so it's the handoffs, from marketing, to the SDRs who maybe they reside in sales, but maybe they reside in marketing. But I see them as like the most important bridge between what marketing does, in terms of feeding the top and the middle of the funnel and, really passing over hopefully qualified opportunities, for the sales team to then
Mhm.
take over the finish line. But then as well as, with client success, and especially in SaaS, where, improving your client success and your retention rates and your client expansion rates, are really important for bottom line revenue. It's important for marketing and client success to be aligned so
Yeah.
that everybody is, playing from the same playbook and communicating the same value proposition. And then it's, well, where does AI fit into that?
Right.
AI, and I mean, in my opinion, and I mean, this may or may not be controversial. I mean, I don't know. You can't just have like an AI strategy. You have to have your business strategy, and you have to have your product strategy, and you have to go to your go to market strategy, which is sales and marketing and client success. And you have your AI strategy across all of those, pieces. So I don't know that I personally would say, well, my AI strategy is this, so I'm going to do all these things at different stages of the client life cycle. I'm going to say, these are all the things I need to do at the different stages of the client life cycle. How is AI going to,
Right.
impact that? That's me.
How long have you been doing this kind of planning or implementing AI into the strategy?
I mean, this is only like the second year.
Yeah.
I mean, it was really just last year, 2024, that it
Yeah.
became so pervasive. Again, I think 2023 and even prior, there's always been automation. There's always been ways to create greater, efficiencies. But I mean, when did ChatGPT come out? Like 2022 or 2023?
Yeah.
It hasn't been that long. It's really revolutionized everything. And so I think it, is partly like how are tools and platforms like that just revolutionizing our world in general, and then how are they revolutionizing what we do professionally and within our specific roles and within our specific companies and et cetera, et cetera.
So I don't know if this is actually a tangent or not, but there's side conversation I wanted to ask you about, but I think it also is probably related to this is the direction that marketing is going. There's been a lot of conversation that it's getting pushed more into sales, like revenue focus rather than, I guess, I don't know, brand or the other focus that it might have. And there's a lot of pressure there. What's your take on this kind of push? Are you seeing this in the market? And is it somewhat related as well to this efficiency, expected efficiency that we're getting from AI?
Yeah. I've seen some pretty heated conversations about it, frankly, to be honest. I'm sure you've seen some of those as well. And I'm not sure I feel that strongly about it, one way or the other. It's been a long time now that marketing has been required to demonstrate the point A of spending to the point B of bookings. It's
Yeah.
been a long time. The data, the technology has existed for us to capture data, to be able to try and draw those lines, however nonlinear they may be when boards of directors and investors and CEOs want them to be entirely linear, which they're not. But, that requirement has existed for a while. What's interesting is the evolution. I think, first it was, there used to be the VP of marketing was the top marketing person and they reported to the CEO. Well, then the chief marketing officer role emerged and that took on, broader responsibility from both a growth and a demand perspective and, greater responsibility in reporting to the board. And, I don't know if it's a chicken egg thing, but, the CRO role is also relatively new. And
Yeah.
that, has emerged as more than just sales, but, also client success and in some cases marketing and, anything that has to do with revenue. And I really haven't given this any thought, so I'm thinking this and I'm saying it out loud, but I think it also has to do with the continued perpetuation of PE investment.
Oh,
And
tell
so
me more.
I'm really, I don't know, maybe this is like a hot take, but I think as, I grew up in earlier in my career in more VC investment era. And it's certainly flipped to seeing much more PE now than VC in
Yeah.
tech, right? And as those changes have occurred, you've seen these sort of broader expansion of responsibilities. And I think the CRO role is one of them. And so I'd be curious, I can go off and do a little research on this. Like, are those things in fact related?
Yeah.
The greater influence of PE toward the evolution of the CRO role. I don't know. At the end of the day, some CEOs and boards are going to believe strongly that marketing is an equal executive contributor and participant to the other C's on the executive team, and some aren't.
Yeah.
And that's going to work in some cultures, and in some cultures, it's not. And I've worked in cultures where I have reported to a CRO and I've owned the marketing function. And I've been in cultures where I've owned my geographic marketing function, but reported to a global CMO. And, they've each had pros and cons as far as kind of the influence and accessibility and really the place that I felt that I had as an executive marketing leader within the extended, executive leadership team. So
Well,
I hope that wasn't kind of a ramble. I'm afraid it may be because I forget exactly where we started, but
no, I
that was my stream of consciousness.
it's a very interesting direction. I've never heard that take before, that it's related to more PE investments. In these different roles that you've been in, like what's it like reporting to a CRO versus reporting to a CMO? How is that
Um,
different?
I've been really lucky my past few go arounds. I've had really great bosses. who've been my manager, who've been my leader, who've been my partner, while also being my manager and been my leader. So I've had a lot of freedom and flexibility to, lead my teams, which has been very fulfilling. But, in both cases, I didn't have a seat at the C-suite table. And, that just means that you're not included in everything. However well those managers communicated to me and shared with me, which they did, very well, and as transparently as I know that they could, it's still just not the same. So, at the end of the day, it depends on the kind of role that you want, the kind of leader that you want to be or that you are, and how that fits into the organizational structure, of the company
Mhm.
that you're in or that you're seeking to go to.
Yeah. It's kind of like human relationships, human households. It's all
Mhm.
human, so every organization is so different. It's
Mhm.
kind of crazy. You would think that at some point it would start to get formalized, but since, each business is just one person starting it and then it grows and however it's going to grow, it's always going to be very different dynamics.
Well, and I mean, not to open a whole can of worms, but like this whole return to office thing where, some companies are just like insisting that people, go to work every day when they were not even hired during a time that they were
Yeah.
ever expected to do that. And then you have other CEOs like you, right? Who just say, I just want to work with the best people.
Yeah.
And I am capable of working remotely and I trust people to work remotely and this is going to work. And so, that's it's going to be interesting to see how things, evolve in the next few
Yeah.
years. Is there going to be a bounce back to hopefully accepting that, the remote work or at least the flexible work really does give people more of an opportunity to have a balance in their work and in their life, and really give them the choice to do what
Mhm.
is going to work best for them rather than being forced, into something that they never may have signed up for in the first place or they hadn't signed up for the past 3 years. So, that'll be, it's, who you find, right? Who you find to work with and who the right partners are.
It's funny that not only is the next year kind of no idea what's about to happen, but I think even the next 2, 3 months, it's like, who knows? We'll
Well,
see.
it's true. I mean, as you know, I'm looking for my next opportunity right now, and I'm in touch with lots of recruiters and lots of people who are at PE firms. And, there was a bit of flurry of activity for me anyway at the beginning of Q1, and then it got quiet, and everybody's like, Q2 is going to get hot. Q2 is going to get hot. Okay, so it's April 1st, right? Like, come on. But nobody really knows. Nobody
Yeah,
really knows because there's a lot of uncertainty, obviously, in the United States and how that affects the global economy. And, it's every day is a bit of an adventure.
yeah. Well, this feels like a good place to wrap it up. Otherwise, we're going to keep opening up these
Yeah.
more Pandora's boxes. We could talk for hours. This has been really great, Rachel. Thank you so much for spending time with me and sharing your experience and perspective today.
Thank you for inviting me. I really enjoyed it and I appreciate it. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Where's the best place for people to connect with you if they want to talk to you more?
Oh, please connect with me on LinkedIn. I think I'm the only Rachel Weeks. So I'm looking forward to, hearing from anybody else who wants to get into conversations like this.
Love it. Well, please do connect with Rachel. And if you enjoyed this episode, remember to give it a like, subscribe, share with somebody, and we will see you in the next one.